All right, thanks everybody. How's everybody doing today? All right, I always get embarrassed hearing my bio, which is strange because I'm the one that put it together, but I always get embarrassed hearing that. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Thank Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Lambda Pi Omega, and Omega Epsilon Omega chapters, Social Justice Initiative for asking me to speak again. We did a panel discussion last year, October 22nd, 2024. It was myself and my radio sister, Livonia Perryman, because Livonia was on 910 AM WFDF as well. And we dealt with Project 2025 and its potential impact on the African American community. And we were warning people about what was to come, and now we're in the storm, okay? So when Farrah Glenn reached out to me a few months ago to ask me to do this presentation, I told her that I had to incorporate some history into this presentation so everybody really understands what's taking place right now, okay? Because this is decades in the making, and the signs were there all along. And if you understand history, you could see these signs. And I made, I'm on Roland Martin Unfiltered every Friday. I've been on for 5 years. I've made, about 250 appearances on Roland Show. And we argue every week pretty much, but, we still bring the information. How many people see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered? Okay. All right. So I made the point one time last year that all of the lights on the dashboard of democracy are flashing red. And it's a warning sign, okay? All right, so this is what I want to do. This presentation, if we can go, Marcus, if we can go to my slides. I have a slideshow presentation. I was up to 2:30 this morning working on this. Then I got off work at 1 p.m., went back home and worked an hour and a half more on this. Okay, so this presentation is called Project 2025, the Impact on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, better known as DEI, all right? And you can visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I got some information at the end for you as well. And at the African History Network, you focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, and this is my information as well, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com and the African History Network show. My website connects you to my social media platforms. Next slide, Marcus. Okay, so here's what I want to do in this presentation in this short amount of time that we have. One, I want to deal with Project 2025 and anti-black policies, okay? And the reason why I want to do this is because I've been talking about Project 2025 since 2023. Okay, it came out April 2023 from the Heritage Foundation. And one of the things I do in my research is I'm looking at trends that are coming. What's coming? What do we have to look out for? I've been in media 15 years, and at one point I was doing the African History Network show 6 days a week. So this is intensive research that I do. And I had so many, and I promise I'm not going to cuss, so don't worry. I know I've been around Roland a long time, but I'm not going to cuss. Don't worry, okay? All right. But I talked to so many Simple Simon black people last year who told me I didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm like, well, hold on. I got it from the Heritage Foundation's website. I can prove this to you, okay? We can look and see how far back this is going, okay? So one of the things I'm going to do is deal with Project 2025 and anti-black policies. 2, break down what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, okay? And why it's more than just a job, because so many of our people thought it was just about jobs, and they circulated this article from Black Enterprise saying only 4% of DEI jobs went to black people, therefore they thought it had no value. It's like, no, forces are using DEI to wipe out 60 years of civil rights progress that African Americans have made. Okay, and if you read, you could see this taking place, because Anytime there have been periods of time of advancement that African Americans have made, there's always been a backlash to that to take us back. There's always been a white backlash to it, whether it happened at the end of Reconstruction in 1877, whether it happened in 1968 to derail the civil rights movement, okay? You can see this coming. So we have to understand, and at the end, when I talk about solutions, I'm going to talk about political self-defense, which is a concept that I've created. We have to be able to assess and understand how to protect gains that have been made. Because there are always threats trying to take you back, and there are forces right now trying to take us back to 1890 in Mississippi. How many people know what happened in 1890 in Mississippi at the Mississippi State Convention, where they rewrote the state constitution to impose poll taxes, literacy tests, and the felony disenfranchisement law to lock African Americans out of political power? Because 2,000 African American men got elected during the Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877. So when that period collapses, then you have the Jim Crow era. And there's a backlash to take us back, okay, and wipe out the gains that we've made. This is what's taking place right now. All right. Okay, 3, how 60 years of civil rights progress has been erased in a matter of months. Nicole Hannah-Jones, who spearheaded the 1619 Project, she wrote an extensive essay for the New York Times in June 2025 that goes in depth and breaks this down, okay? And I did a segment on my show that deals with this. I talked about it a couple weeks ago on Roland Martin Unfiltered, so I'm going to share an excerpt of that with you to understand how wide-ranging this black erasure is taking place. And oftentimes, the mistake that many people make is that we think that gains that we made, laws that were passed, were permanent. Okay, and we don't have to fight to keep those policies in place. Okay, so now we're seeing what happens when not enough people fight back. Okay, number 4, changing the focus. What's taking place right now is we have a changing of the focus of civil rights laws to fight discrimination against white people. The laws that were passed historically, primarily for African Americans, are now being used in saying that white people are being discriminated against, whether it's the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was passed a year after slavery ended, and this was passed by Congress, and this was a law that allowed African Americans, former slaves, to enter into contracts and labor contracts, things like this, okay? Whether it's the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of 1868, which was primarily passed for African Americans, former slaves, it gives us citizenship. Now we see many of those same laws being used against us, but at the same time, we're being told that we want to fill Dr. King's dream, and we want a colorblind society. Why they wipe out Dr. King's dream, why they wipe out 60 years of civil rights progress. Okay, and then we'll deal with the attack on voting rights. Right now, you got attack on Section 2 of the 1965 Civil Rights Act. The reason why you needed the 1965 Civil Rights Act is because what happened in Mississippi in 1890. What happened in South Carolina, what happened in Louisiana in 1898, because what Mississippi did was called the Mississippi Plan. It became a model for all the other southern states, former Confederate states, to rewrite their state constitutions, impose poll taxes, literacy tests. Louisiana imposed the grandfather clause. So if your grandfather couldn't vote prior to 1867, that meant that you couldn't vote. These were all methods to get around the 15th Amendment of 1870, which guaranteed the right to vote for African American men. Okay? For women, it's going to come with the 19th Amendment in 1920. But in the South, many of us still couldn't vote because of the poll taxes and because of terrorism as well. Okay? So we can draw a direct line from the end of Reconstruction, 1877, to 1890, and the white county judge that presided over the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, his name was Solomon Saladin Calhoun. He said, we came here to exclude the Negro. They said specifically what they were trying to do, okay, and they succeeded. All right, and then we'll deal with erasing African-American history, the effort that's taking place to erase African-American history while resurrecting Confederate monuments. They both deal with history. You're attacking the African American Smithsonian Museum. You're attacking African American history. You're banning books, but you want to resurrect Confederate monuments. These are people who committed treason against the Union based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution, took up arms to protect slavery. And you're resurrecting their monuments. You're bringing back their paintings. You're renaming schools and things like this after, I thought these people were traitors. And then lastly, if we have time, if you want me to deal with this, all right, because I was on Carl Nelson's show, WOL, out of Baltimore, blew everybody away. I did a video back in April 2025 dealing with this topic. Can a president be elected or serve more than 2 terms? Got 130,000 views on my Facebook page, the African History Network, where I have 1 million followers. And all I can say is, it ain't as clear cut as people think it is. Because I did the research. People talk about the 22nd Amendment that says no person can be elected to more than 2 terms, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's true, but you're not talking about Section 2 of the 25th Amendment, because most of the legal scholars on CNN and MSNBC are not talking about that. So I broke that down, and nobody has refuted what I said. So I'll give you the brief version, because I got 11 pages of notes on that last point. I did the research. Okay, now, so let's get into this. Let's go to the next slide, Marcus. Okay, so what is Project 2025? Okay, now Project 2025 is a 922-page playbook from a conservative organization called the Heritage Foundation. It consists of about 318 policy recommendations. Now, it is a backlash to the racial justice reckoning that took place in the U.S. after the death of George Floyd, May 25th, 2020, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So many of you remember this was during COVID. Many people were at home. We're watching the video on the news, on MSNBC, CNN, things like this. People are out in the street marching, protesting. Corporations come out and say, oh, this is horrible, what happened? We're going to throw tens of millions of dollars at this group, at that group, all of this, right? Okay, but now you got a lot of people act like that didn't happen. Now you have people, you have corporations that put policies in place that say we want, racial justice, we want equity and things like this. Now they're saying, well, that was nice, but the climate has changed, so we don't need that anymore. Okay, really? How did you do a survey to determine that those policies aren't needed anymore? All right, so Project 2025 attacks DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, attacks affirmative action, attacks African American history, and it's actually called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, Project 2025, Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Now, it was released in April 2023. I found out about it in its full form in September, right about September 23rd, 2023, on Ali Velshi's show on MSNBC. He did an in-depth dive into the entire program. I saw bits and pieces of it before then, but when I saw his show, September 23rd, 2023, I said, this is not going to end up well. All right, now, I've been talking about it since then. Now, most African Americans did not find out about it until Taraji P. Henson warned us about it at the BET Awards, July 2024. It came out a year and 2 months before that. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to do a deep dive analysis. How is it that we're all walking around with smartphones, but many of us are uninformed? Many of us don't know. I know you had a lot of people last year saying, can you believe they wrote it down? The Heritage Foundation has been put in their policy playbook called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. They've been putting it in writing each election cycle going back to 1981. This is documented. 1981, it was a New York Times bestseller. No, y'all think I'm playing. In 1981, Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise was a New York Times bestselling book. So we have to ask the question, well, hold on, while we're distracted with reality TV shows and housewife this and hip hop that and all this stuff, what's going on to determine our future and our conditions? Okay, now, according to the Project 2025 tracker, 48% of the 319 policies have been put in place since the beginning of this year, even though you had people who said, I don't know anything about Project 2025, okay? And I sat there listening to this stuff. I said, I can't believe people fall for this. All right, now, so one of the things that I talk about, we have to understand is history, economics, law, and politics. History, economics, law, and politics, all right? And it was 140 people from the administration just a few years ago to help write Project 2025. So when people say, oh, they don't know anything about it, I'm like, oh, okay, you just stuck on stupid. Some people you just can't help. All right, now, when we look at the anti-black policies coming from Project 2025 and the current administration, I know, so one of the things I talk about is how racism attacks all black people regardless of country or origin, language spoken, or religion. Because some of us think that our proximity to white supremacy is going to protect us from white supremacy, and it's not, okay? It doesn't matter which country you come from, which language you speak, which religion, etc. We see all of us are being attacked. And at the same time, what happens is, and many of you saw this, you had people telling white people the reason why you don't have this, the reason why you aren't successful, the reason why you don't have a job is because of black people, DEI, and affirmative action. And they didn't earn it. We want a merit-based society. Then they tell black people the reason why you don't have this, the reason why you don't have a job is because of immigrants and undocumented immigrants. Then they tell everybody the reason why your child didn't win, the reason why your daughter didn't win the athletic competition is because of transgendered athletes. And transgender people make up 0.6% of the U.S. population. And then on day one, they come after everybody. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so there's a good article. I went back in my archives and I was looking at some articles to put together this presentation. There's a really good article from USA Today. This is called What is Project 2025? The Presidential Transition Project Explained. Now, this article is from June 21st, 2024. That's when it was updated, originally June 10th, 2024. Okay? And here's what it says. The detailed plan to dismantle and reconstruct the government laid out by conservative groups known as the 2025 Presidential Transition Project has critics up in arms over its apocalyptic and authoritarian nature. The Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C., led an effort to create the more than 900-page Mandate for Leadership published in April 2023, reimagining the executive branch and presented a plan to overhaul several federal government agencies, including the FBI, for the country's next conservative president to follow. Okay? Next slide. All right, now, the mandate attacks several policies that former recent administrations have instituted, including student loan forgiveness and the Affordable Care Act, also called Obamacare, right? It simultaneously calls for expanded executive power for the commander-in-chief. That's the executive unitarian theory, and it's taking power away from the legislative branch of government, from Congress, okay? So we all learn in civics class and social studies class the three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Judicial is the courts. Legislative is the House of Representatives and the Senate. Executive is the president. And it's supposed to be a balance in the powers. That's the way the founding fathers, and even though some of them were slave owners, you know, some things they did do right. That's the way the founding fathers laid out that balance of power. Okay? All right, next slide. All right, now, this was another good article here. This is from, this is What is Project 2025? What to know about the conservative blueprint for a second Trump administration. Now, this is from CBSnews.com. So I monitor about 35 different news sources on a daily basis. I know I consume more than the average person, all right? So I have thousands of articles in my office, printed articles in my office. This is one of them. This is from October 1st, 2024, all right? Here's an excerpt of what this article says. Project 2025 is a proposed presidential transition project that is composed of 4 pillars. 1, a policy guide for the next presidential administration. 2, a LinkedIn-style database of personnel who could serve in the next administration. 3, training for that pool of candidates dubbed the Presidential Administration Academy. And 4, a playbook of actions to be taken within the first 180 days in office. So the question I asked, and I'm still waiting on an answer. Okay, so if this is what's planned the first 180 days in office, what's planned for the other 3.5 years? Are we to believe that they don't have that written down too? Okay, so, all right, next slide, Marcus. Much of the focus on and criticism of Project 2025 involves its first pillar, a nearly 900-page policy playbook. It's actually 922 pages. It's about 30 chapters or so that lays out an overhaul of the federal government. It's called Mandate for Leadership 2025, The Conservative Promise. No, I was just on the Heritage Foundation's website yesterday. They're selling the book for $125, just so y'all know. You can buy it. They're selling the book for $125. Okay? I thought it was a hoax. The book builds on a Mandate for Leadership first published in January 1981, which sought to serve as a roadmap for Ronald Reagan's incoming administration. They've been planning this over 40 years. And see, what I find interesting is this is CBS News. This isn't some conspiracy theory website. This is October. This is actually a year ago. And some of our people still haven't caught up. So this is why we got to take this information. This is why we have to take this information to them. Okay. All right. Okay. Next slide. All right. Now, still in the same article, the Heritage Foundation also created a Mandate for Leadership in 2015. Now, hold on. In 2015, ahead of the first term, okay, Trump's first term, 2 years into the presidency, it touted that it had instituted 64% of its policy recommendations, ranging from leaving the Paris Climate Accords, increasing military spending, and increasing offshore drilling and developing federal lands. Well, you've done this before. When you go research it at the Heritage Foundation's website, they got an article from January 2018 where they talk about how they got 64% of their policies put in place in 2017. So I was dealing with this on Roland's show. I was dealing with this on my show. I was putting this on my social media platforms. And people were saying, oh, this is a hoax. This doesn't exist. I'm like, and at some point, you just have to let some people go. They're just not going to get it. Okay? You know, what was it Erykah Badu said, maybe next lifetime, something like that? They're just not going to get it. Okay? Next slide. All right, now listen right here. This article here. So going back in my archives, I was like, okay, so how can we build this bridge? This article is from April 1st, 2024. And I wish it was an April Fool's joke, but it's not. This is from Axios.com. This is one of the sites I read, news sites I read every day. Name of this article is Allies Plot Anti-Racism Protections for White People. Go to the next slide, Marcus. This is a very interesting article. This is saying what is going to happen if something didn't happen in November 2024. And it's explaining what's going to happen. Here's what it says. It says if somebody returns to the White House, close allies want to dramatically change the government's interpretation of civil rights era laws to focus on anti-white racism rather than discrimination against people of color. Okay? Now, this is in the article from April 2024. Next slide. The Department of Justice for an incoming administration would push to eliminate or upend programs in government and corporate America that are designed to counter racism that has favored whites. So what they're saying is that they're reversing programs that were beneficial, even remotely beneficial for black people. That's what this article is telling us is going to happen. Targets would range from decades-old policies aimed at giving minorities economic opportunities to more recent programs that began in response to the pandemic and the killing of George Floyd. So when you get into this research, you keep seeing some constant themes. One, you keep seeing the backlash to the racial reckoning that took place after the death of George Floyd. Policies put in place, donations given, programs put in place, all of this. One. Two, you see them using the 2023, I think it was June, July 2023 U.S. Supreme Court ruling banning affirmative action in college admissions. Okay? So they use that as a foundation to then say, well, if you can't have affirmative action here, then we're going to wipe out affirmative action everywhere and anything that looks like affirmative action. Okay? Three, you see an attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion all across the board, not just jobs. We're talking about grants for environmental justice grants. We're talking about in the Department of Justice and holding police departments accountable, things like this in the Department of Justice. We're looking at all across the board, okay? All right, now, a central vehicle for the effort has been an organization called America First Legal, okay, who was and America First Legal cited the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in February in a lawsuit against CBS, the broadcasting network, and Paramount Global, okay, for what the group argued was discrimination against a white straight man who was a writer for the show, SEAL Team in 2017. So they're going back. Now, back during 2021 and 2022, during the pandemic, we started seeing a rise in book banning. We started seeing a rise in organizations formed at the local level that were, one, putting pressure on school boards to ban certain books, usually books dealing with African-American history, slavery, things of this nature, okay? Two, they started running school board candidates, gaining power at the local level, all right? And we start really seeing backlash coming from there. Okay, go back to the slide, Marcus. What's taking place and what has been taking place is that you're suppressing the teaching of African American history, but you keep going back using laws from that period of time to attack us today and shape the future. So you use the 1964 Civil Rights Act against African Americans. You use the 1866 Civil Rights Act against African Americans. You use Section 1 of the 14th Amendment of 1868, which was to give citizenship to former slaves. You use that against us. But at the same time, you want to suppress the teaching of the history from that same period of time. Okay, next slide. Okay, now, in 2021, America First Legal successfully sued to block the implementation of a $29 billion pandemic-era program for women and minority-owned restaurants, saying it discriminated against white business owners. Now, so this is a common theme that you'll see. So they'll say, we want a merit-based society, we want a colorblind society, we're going to fulfill Dr. King's dream, therefore we don't want racism against anybody, so we're going to wipe out all these policies that have been beneficial for African Americans. Okay, yeah, go back to that. Okay, now, go back to the previous slide for 1 second here. All right, now, The Heritage Foundation's well-funded Project 2025 envisions a second administration ending what it calls affirmative discrimination. Affirmative discrimination. Okay, next slide. All right, now such groups have gained momentum after the Supreme Court's 2023 rejection of affirmative action in college admissions. The court ruled that programs designed to benefit people of color and address past injustices discriminated against white and Asian Americans. Now, also in 2021, they attacked black farmers when $4 billion in federal funds were going to go to African American farmers and farmers of color because of historic discrimination. Lawsuits were filed by white farmers saying we're being discriminated against. This is what happened here. Known as Section 1005, the program was created as part of a $1.9 trillion stimulus package that Congress passed in March 2021. It was intended to provide debt relief to socially disadvantaged farmers. Now, this is a buzzword. They're wiping out policies that deal with socially disadvantaged or disadvantaged. And they're saying that they're race-based policies, therefore they are illegal. Okay, but they don't want to admit to the racism that caused the policies to be needed in the first place. So therefore they say we want a colorblind society. That's what you people said you wanted. Okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to wipe all this stuff out and we're going to have a colorblind society. Okay, socially disadvantaged farmers defined by the government as those who are black, American Indian, Alaska Native, Hispanic, Asian, and Pacific Islander. Okay, next slide. Okay, now this one here. This is from 2024, this article. How many people saw this? This is New York Times. I read New York Times every day. And I got a full-time job, but I still monitor. I follow 35 different news sources on a daily basis. I get alerts all throughout the day, emails all throughout the day from news sources. It was like that before I was on Roland's daily digital show, I used to guest host his nationally syndicated radio show. So I'm on the air and I got 2 phones. I'm getting alerts from different news sources and I'm breaking news stories on the air, things of this nature, right? Okay, federal judge rules minority business agency must serve white people as well. Anybody see this article? Anybody hear about this? And see what I'm saying is that, okay, the signs are there. We have to understand how to decode the symbols. So this article is from March 6, 2024, New York Times. Go to the next slide, Marcus, please. It says in March 2024, a federal judge ruled that the Commerce Department's Minority Business Development Agency was discriminating against white people, and that the program had to be open to everyone. Now, the Minority Business Development Agency is a Commerce Department program created during the Nixon administration to help minority-owned businesses. To help minority-owned businesses, discriminates against white people and must offer its services to people of all races and ethnic groups, a federal judge in Texas ruled. Okay, next slide. The judge, U.S. District Court, sided with 2 of the 3 white business owners who sued the agency that they were told its assistance was limited to members of disadvantaged minority groups. So because of this is one of the reasons why programs, like there was a DEI program for black farmers that just a few months ago got wiped out. It was for socially disadvantaged farmers. Gone. So they're targeting any of these programs, okay? So even though this is not reparations, and if anybody see my presentation to the Detroit Reparations Task Force, March 2nd, 2024, anybody see that presentation? It's on my YouTube channel. It's gotten thousands of views. Anybody see that? Okay. Even though this isn't reparations, right? You have to understand the concept of repairing the damage, okay, of racism and white supremacy and these policies, right? They're coming and taking all this back. They're trying to take us back to 1890, while at the same time resurrecting Confederate monuments. The presumption that the business owners were not disadvantaged violated the 14th Amendment guarantee of equal protection under the law, wrote the federal judge, who permanently barred the agency from serving only members of minority groups. So here's the 14th Amendment that was originally for African Americans. Now you're using it against us. All this is being weaponized. Okay, next slide. Okay, now, to warn us about Project 2025, the Legal Defense Fund's Thurgood Marshall Institute, they released a newsletter and a report, October 4th, 2024, to warn us of some things. And this dealt with what Project 2025 means for black communities. Anybody read it? Anybody hear about it? Okay. All right. All right. Okay, so here's an excerpt of what it said. Dangerous efforts like Project 2025 only seek to reverse progress that black communities have fought so hard to achieve for generations within the United States. Within the United States, such anti-democratic, democratic with a small d, such anti-democratic, anti-justice actions threaten the very fabric of U.S. democracy with a small d as a whole, said Carla McCanders, director of the Thurgood Marshall Institute. Quote, next slide, Marcus. Quote, we find ourselves at a critical juncture that we have visited many times before in this country's history. A choice to propel forward in pursuit of a stronger nation that lives up to our constitutional ideas, or fall backwards into antiquated, divisive ways that act to reverse civil rights and concentrate power in the hands of a privileged few. We must categorically disavow any proposal or action such as Project 2025 that threatens to harm communities and work collaboratively to build an equitable, inclusive future, end quote. Okay, next slide. That's just an excerpt from it. So then they lay out the potential harms. The new report outlines the ways in which black communities will be adversely impacted by Project 2025, including weakening anti-discrimination laws and cutting essential workers' protections. Okay, for instance, eliminate key safeguards that protect black workers and bar federal agencies from collecting racial demographic data, making it harder to enforce anti-discrimination laws. Because what's taking place right now, and what Nicole Hannah-Jones outlined in her essay for the New York Times, and I printed it out, it's 14 pages, it's a deep analysis. They're removing, at the federal level, they're removing the enforcement mechanisms in various civil rights departments across the federal government. They're removing that, so now you can't enforce it. They're removing the teeth from it, okay? And at the same time, one of the things that's being done is the analysis, the studies, to study the discrepancies, to study the discrimination, things like that, that's being shut down. So if you don't have the evidence, now you can't craft the policy, because now you don't know how pervasive the harm is. Okay. Now, 2, limiting access to quality education for black students. Exacerbate the education and wealth gap for black students and workers by dismantling the Department of Education. Now, this came out October 4th, 2024. They were warning us. I talked about this on the African History Network show. They were warning of us of what's coming. Chapter 11 of Project 2025 deals with dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. They put it in the book. And so the Department of Education, for those that don't know, was created in 1979 by Congress, signed into law by the president at the time, okay? And the reason why conservatives want to destroy the Department of Education is because one of the things that it does is enforce civil rights of students. And this goes back to Brown versus Board of Education and the anti-desegregation movement. And in 1956, there was a movement called Massive Resistance coming out of Virginia. Massive Resistance, which was a resistance by white segregationists to resist desegregation. Okay? Then you had the IRS threatening to take the nonprofit status away from a lot of Christian schools that refused to desegregate. Okay, like in 1976. Then 1979, the Department of Education is created. So you've had people that want to dismantle it since it started. Now, contrary to popular belief, the Department of Education does not set curriculum. That's set at the state and local level. Contrary to popular belief, 92% of funding comes from the state and local level for education. Only 8% from the Department of Education. So when I hear people say, "Well, we want to send funding back to the states," well, it's already coming from the states. 92%. They're running game on people. I'm from Detroit. I know hustlers when I see them. Okay, they're running game on people. All right, next slide. Okay, undermining black political power. Undermining black political power by overhauling the U.S. Census Bureau and criminalizing election-related offenses. Project 2025 will weaken the political influence of black communities by undercounting them and suppressing the black vote through threats and intimidation, destabilizing the key foundations of our multiracial democracy. Like, for instance, I'm not saying somebody would do this, but for instance, like having the National Guard out in communities on election day. I'm not saying somebody would do this. That's one of the ways to suppress the vote. Or gerrymandering districts before you take the next census. All this is going back to 1890 and 1895, South Carolina, Louisiana, 1898. So as a historian, I see these things taking place, and I'm like, hold on, this is what they did. This is what I was warning people about. Okay, now, promoting a punitive criminal legal policy, punitive criminal legal policies. Project 2025 will endanger black communities by likely increasing the use of the U.S. racially discriminatory death penalty and rolling back efforts to address police misconduct for constitutional and civil rights violations. Like, I don't know, ending lawsuits against the Minneapolis Police Department and against the Louisville, Kentucky Police Department after the death of Breonna Taylor. Something like that the Department of Justice would do. I'm not saying they would do it, they just did it. I'm not saying they would do it, but this is what they're warning us about. Okay? Next slide. Then jeopardizing black families' access to affordable housing. Project 2025 would transfer control of critical housing programs to expand access to affordable housing, like Section 8 to states, including those with a history of racial discrimination threatening the housing stability of millions of black low-income families. Okay, there are a couple more, but I think you get the picture. Okay, so read that. Okay, this is LDF's Thurgood Marshall Institute releases new report, What Project 2025 Means for Black Communities. Okay, this is from October 4th, 2024. Okay, next slide, Marcus. And then they're talking about threatening. Okay, this is, okay, I'll go over this quickly. Threatening reproductive rights and the health of black people. Okay, and they talk about black pregnant women who already face disproportionately high maternal mortality rates would be hit the hardest by Project 2025's restrictions on reproductive health care, which includes proposals to ban federal access to abortion care and criminalize health care providers. Given that 42% of women seeking abortion care are black, This proposal will have devastating consequences for their health and autonomy and the health and autonomy of their families. Okay, so check that out. All right, next slide. Okay, and exacerbating health disparities caused by environmental racism. This deals with shutting down the Office of Environmental Justice, okay, that enforced civil rights laws and things like this, and disparities when it came to African Americans being disproportionately harmed by pollution, things like this. I'm not saying somebody would shut it down, but it just got shut down. Next. Okay, now, this was a good article here from CNN. What is DEI and why is it dividing America? Now, this is from January 23rd, 2025. Okay, what is DEI and why is it dividing America? So just a quick synopsis of this. Go to the next slide, please. This piece talks about, they interviewed 7 DEI experts, okay, and industry leaders. Most had a shared vision for what constitutes the concept of DEI. Now, when we talk about diversity, they said diversity means embracing the differences everyone brings to the table, whether those are someone's race, age, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, or other aspects of social identity. Because being disabled is part of DEI, diversity. Veterans, people who served in the military, that's part of DEI, diversity. For some reason, people just think that DEI means black. No, it doesn't. Okay, it's a number of different things. 2, equity. What is equity? Equity is treating everyone fairly and providing equal opportunities. Okay, next slide. And then 3, inclusion. What does inclusion mean? Inclusion is respecting everyone's voice, and creating a culture in which people from all backgrounds feel encouraged to express their ideas and perspectives. Okay, now DEI was created because marginalized communities have not always had equal opportunities for jobs or felt a sense of belonging in majority white corporate settings. I've been there, said Daniel Apong, founder of the Courage Collective, a consultancy that advises companies on DEI. Next slide. He said, that is the genesis of why some of these programs exist, he said. It was an attempt to try to create workplaces where more or all people can thrive. Now, I'll be the first to admit, DEI didn't go as far as it should have gone, didn't go as far as it needed to go. Some corporations weren't as committed as others. But that doesn't mean you should get rid of it. That doesn't mean you should criminalize it. That doesn't mean you should investigate organizations and schools that have diversity, equity, and inclusion programs because you think they discriminate against white people. Next. Now, the backlash from the same article, the backlash against DEI may feel like a pendulum swing from 2020 when the nation faced a racial reckoning after a black father, George Floyd, was killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota by a white police officer. But the DEI practice has been around for decades. The origins of DEI programs date back to the origins of DEI programs date back to the Civil Rights Movement, which played a pivotal role in accelerating efforts to create more diverse and inclusive workplaces, said Dominique Hollins, founder of the DEI consulting firm We360. Next slide. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed employment discrimination based on race, religion, sex, color, and national origin. It also banned segregation in public places like public schools and libraries. And Title VII of the Civil Rights Act established the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, which works to eliminate employment discrimination. That's under attack right now. Next slide, Marcus. In the 1960s and 1970s, employees began filing discrimination lawsuits with the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and many companies started incorporating diversity into their business strategies by providing diversity training, according to a 2008 report published in the Academy of Management, Learning, and Education. These diversity training efforts emerged around the time affirmative action began by executive order from President John F. Kennedy at first. Although the concepts may seem similar, affirmative action is different from DEI, as affirmative action required federal contractors by executive order to treat applicants and employees equally based on race, color, religion, and sex. Okay, and you're gonna have Executive Order 11246 signed by President Lyndon Johnson in 1965. That's gone now too, just so y'all know if you haven't been paying attention. Then George Floyd's murder renewed the push for DEI leadership roles and initiatives at major corporations. Between 2019 and 2022, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer roles grew by 168.9%, a LinkedIn analysis found. Now, though, some of those efforts have been rolled back and DEI roles abandoned because leaders did not feel fully supported. But a lot of people in those roles, some African American, did not feel fully supported from the organization, from their higher ups. And this is something that Hollins said also. Companies, quote, now pay attention to this, companies, quote, were giving the appearance of commitment without actually doing the right work for that commitment to be sustainable, end quote. And now, back when this was taking place, because I remember when all this was going down, and we talked about it on the African History Network show, we talked about it on Roland Martin Unfiltered, I'm on other shows. I'm looking and I'm like, okay, this ain't gonna last long. We gotta wait, we gotta watch the backlash. Okay, now these programs and this organization gonna donate tens of millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter and do this and that. And it got so confusing, they were donating to the wrong organizations. Then they had to take the money back and go give it to this organization, right? But I said, even though this is not 100% everything we want, we're gonna have to protect it, because I knew forces were gonna come take it back. Okay, next slide. Now, what does DEI look like at work? DEI in the workplace can be a mix of employee training, resource networks, and recruiting practices, said Kelly Baker, Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at Thrivent, an organization that provides financial advice. Okay, so I encourage you, read this full article, because this goes in depth. I'm just skimming the surface of it. What is DEI and why is it dividing America? It's from CNN. Okay, next slide. And then at the end, because I'm gonna wrap up in about 25 minutes or so, and then we're gonna open it up to questions. Okay, so write down your questions. Now, this is a good article from January 14th, 2024, which deals with using the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the year after slavery ended, using it against black people. DEI opponents are using an 1866 civil rights law to challenge equity policies in the workplace. Anybody read Associated Press? Article, go to apnews.com, okay, Associated Press. Because about 30 to 40% of articles from other news sources, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, some other news sources, they get their articles from the Associated Press, okay? So when you see AP, that's Associated Press. When you see AP, like in the byline, the source of the article, that's the Associated Press. Opponents of workplace diversity programs are increasingly banking on a section of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 to challenge equity policies as well as funding to minority-owned businesses. So they're going after the money. It's not just jobs. They're going after programs that gave grants to black-owned businesses. They went after the Fearless Fund, the black women that created the fund for women business owners of color. They went after that. The same person who brought the lawsuit to strike down affirmative action in college admissions, then went after the Fearless Fund. They used the 14th Amendment to strike down affirmative action in college admissions, and then they used the 1866 Civil Rights Act to attack the Fearless Fund. Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was originally meant to protect formerly enslaved people, or black people specifically, from economic exclusion. But now, the Alliance for Equal Rights, a group run by Edward Bloom, the conservative activist who challenged affirmative action in higher education and won, that's the Supreme Court case 2023, is citing the Section 1981 to go after a venture capital fund called the Fearless Fund, which invests in businesses owned by women of color. A federal appeals court temporarily blocked. Okay, so that went, and what the Fearless Fund had to do is they're coming out with a new fund, but the way that they were doing one of their funds, it was a $20,000 grant. They really had to stop doing it that way because of this lawsuit. But what they're trying to do is across the board, any policies that are remotely beneficial for African Americans, especially dealing with grants for businesses, things like this, they're going through and systematically wiping all of that out. Next slide. Conservative activists have brought lawsuits urging the 1981 section against corporations, against other companies and institutions, including insurance company Progressive and pharmaceutical giant Pfizer. The cases are being monitored carefully as the battle over racial considerations shift to the workplace following the U.S. Supreme Court's June 2023 ruling ending affirmative action in college admissions. Okay, next slide. While the 1981 section had been used well before the latest affirmative action ruling to prove reverse discrimination, Alfonso David, the Fearless Fund's legal counsel, who serves as president and CEO of the Global Black Economic Forum, said that there's a coordinated use of Section 1981 now that we did not see before. Okay, next slide. All right, so what is Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act of 1866? The 1866 Civil Rights Act is a federal law prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, and ethnicity when making and enforcing contracts. Okay, this deals with contracts. This deals with business. This deals with businesses. And as Roland talks about on his show periodically, he said they're trying to defund Black America. All these policies they're going back and wiping out. Section 1981 specifically grants all individuals within the U.S. jurisdiction the same rights and benefits as enjoyed by white citizens regarding contractual relationships. Okay? All right, so read the rest of that. All right, next slide. Okay, now this piece right here, this was Nicole Hannah-Jones' fantastic essay for the New York Times, came out June 27, 2025. Anybody hear about it? How Trump upended 60 years of civil rights in 2 months. Anybody hear about it? Okay? And I've read through a lot of it. All right? Here's an excerpt of it. Let's go to the next slide, Marcus. Here's an excerpt of it. In 2024, a little-known office in the U.S. Department of Labor helped black workers at a Texas medical center recover $900,000 in back wages, and black workers at a Caterpillar manufacturing plant in Illinois recover $800,000 in back wages each time over allegations that those applicants lost out on jobs because of their race. Called the Office of Federal Contract Compliance, the FCCP, or the OFCCP, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. This division investigates and fights employment discrimination for 1/5 of the U.S. labor force. It was created in 1965, okay, when President Johnson signed an executive order strengthening the provision of the Civil Rights